Speaking of risks, I don't remember if I've heard you talk about the ETFs.
The ETFs is the worst.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the worst shit. There's nothing good about them at all, except number go up, which isn't, to be fair, number go up is an important part of how Bitcoin works, even if it's something we say ironically, it is actually genuinely important. Like that's why Bcash is dead, right? Because the price is in the toilet. Like you need actually for it to be treated as a scarce thing, not just to be technically scarce. Bitcoin's scarcity comes as a result of its high price because that's what motivates us to make sure it remains scarce. That's really important. ETFs is not your keys, not your coins. It's leaving your coin. It's just a bunch of financialization. It's fake Bitcoin. It's 6102able. I hate it. I hate everything about it. We've literally won wars based on the fact that people are in control of their own UTXOs. If you care about Bitcoin, you must control a UTXO because if there's ever a scenario where there is a fork and you need to vote with your UTXOs and dump on one side of the fork, you're going to want the hands that have all the UTXOs in the network to not be BlackRock. That's just goes without saying, right? And we're moving away from that. But fortunately, they entered late enough in the game. Like even with all the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars they've thrown at buying up a lot of Bitcoin, they still barely have any. Like MicroStrategy is going to outclass a lot of them. I think collectively they might have more than that. Do you have any numbers on how many Bitcoins the ETFs actually claim to own now?
Yeah, I believe it recently ticked over 1 million.
So they've already got around 3 times what Michael Saylor's managed to amass. But it's a significant amount. It would be rough in another SegWit 2x style scenario where we're dumping on two sides of a fork to dictate what Bitcoin is. I don't like the fact that 1 million Bitcoins are owned by a bunch of assholes that represent the system that gave us the very circumstances out of which Bitcoin was born, which was the global financial crisis. That was literally the context for Bitcoin's creation, right? And I'm not saying it was Satoshi's motivation, but it was definitely a perfect moment in time for us to all go, we need money and we need to play an unriggable game. We need an unriggable economy with no bailouts, and we're going to need unriggable money for that. So that's what we had. And it was the perfect time for us to all realize we needed it. And the people that were the beneficiaries of all that rigging are the people that run the ETFs. So no thanks. I don't really want them. I don't want the fox in charge of the hen house again.
I think that's a great way to put it. The fox in charge of the hen house. Is there a number of coins that seriously concerns you, like locked into the ETFs? Is it 3 million coins, 5 million coins? How does the math change, or where compared to where we are today?
There's no threshold. I think you need for us to survive a fork war scenario where people are voting with their UTXOs. Um, you need you need a strong 70 or 80% of the UTXOs involved in it to be at the hands of willing advocates and ideologically committed to Bitcoin entities that are willing to dump the competing fork. And if the ETF already has 1 million, you need at least 2 or 3 million UTXOs worth of Bitcoin, um, or Bitcoin's worth of UTXOs to be in the hands of that kind of person, right? Satoshi still has around 1 million Bitcoins, and there's always the opportunity that he comes back in some scenario that contentious. But he sat out the block size wars, as far as I know, and he sat out Craig Wright. So he is very unwilling, if he's still around, to come in and say, all right, I'll save this thing. Maybe in that scenario he would, if there was a contentious fork, if it was SegWit 2x all over again. But I mean, it's awkward because you need a futures market to exist and you need to trust the person that's writing the whole thing to create something that's, the way Bitfinex structured the SegWit 2x futures market literally pushed everyone to one side. The way they said in the contract they laid out, you know, if there's some sort of discrepancy or some weirdness that happens on either side of this fork, we're going back to this version of Bitcoin, right? And all the others will just disappear as though they never existed. And the version they highlighted as the incumbent Bitcoin was the good side, my side, the side that won the fork wars, and the side I obviously agree with. that had a factor in how that whole thing went, right? So that's important. So again, if it's an institution like Bitfinex that does it next time we're in that scenario, if they're linked with the ETF, then they're going to side with whatever the ETF wants, which is just going to be, yeah, we don't care about long term, we don't care about KYC free or any of that. They're just going to want number go up and as much compliance as possible. And the cypherpunks need to fight incredibly hard to resist that. So to answer, I think you'd need 2 or 3 million Bitcoins worth of UTXOs to fight back against the ETFs having 1 million. You need to overwhelm them. It's not just, oh, we had 51% and they had 49%. No, you need to be overwhelmingly dominant in that position. It's when you'd need like Roger Ver and people like that who were on our side long enough ago. He was once on our side with hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. You need them dumping it hard on the fork side that's trying to impose a bunch of KYC or AML or any of that crap. You need hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins being dumped in minutes, nuking that thing to zero so that everyone gives up.
That's a really good answer, really tangible answer. I've never given it that much thought before. I think the way you frame it of we need 2 to 3 million, this is self-custodied UTXOs, which is the really important part. I think it's really difficult to get a gauge of, where Bitcoin adoption is at. But I think Blockware did a good report a while ago, and they said there's somewhere around 40 million on-chain users. But if you have a look at the number of Bitcoin users on exchanges, there's like 400 million people who may or may not have bought some Bitcoin on an exchange. And like you say, the exchanges could side with the BlackRocks or the ESG fork or the proof of stake fork. So,
I mean, Mt. Gox is giving everyone some money at the moment, right? But they're also giving them their Bcash. You know, they could have decided that Bcash was the real Bitcoin and never given you your Bitcoin. That's the extreme example of it, right? They could have just been big block idealists that went, oh yeah, Bitcoin, SegWit Bitcoin's nothing to do with it. Like we threw that all in the garbage or sold it, right? Because there was a bunch of other forks. What did they do with them? There was Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin Diamond. They're not honoring any of those. They probably just sold them all. So like they can just sell your Bitcoin, the thing you think is Bitcoin, and they can say, oh, yeah, we went with the ETFs and the government and all that stuff. And we did what the SEC told us, which is this new version of Bitcoin. And we have 1 million Bitcoins worth of UTXOs on this new chain to back it up. We're putting our UTXOs where our mouth is. Can you imagine a scenario like that? Like it's very possible if you have enough Bitcoins inside those institutions. It starts to become like an inevitability at some point. So don't sell coins to BlackRock is basically like the solution.
And take self-custody of your Bitcoin. You never know when Mt. Gox is going to go bankrupt. Now, speaking of Bitcoin custody, I wanted to quickly interrupt this interview to remind you guys, please get your Bitcoin off an exchange. If you are looking for a hardware wallet in the market, look for a Bitcoin only one. If you did want a really simple and easy to use hardware wallet to put your Bitcoin on, you can use a Bitbox, and you can even get 5% off a Bitbox with a promo code Luke5. But don't stop there. Most people make the pivotal mistake of getting a hardware wallet, writing down their Bitcoin private seed phrase onto a piece of paper, but they stop there. They leave their 12 or their 24 words on paper, but we all know paper does not survive the test of time, okay? If there's a flood, if there's a fire, guess what happens to your Bitcoin wallet and your Bitcoin backup phrase on that piece of paper? Adios, it's gone, okay? You don't have your Bitcoin anymore. This is why we're really thrilled to be partnering up with Stampseed. What you should be doing after you buy your hardware wallet is actually stamping your Bitcoin private seed phrase onto titanium, okay? Titanium survives floods, it survives fires, it survives everything. It is your essential partner to make sure your generational wealth does actually survive for generations. So you guys can also get 15% off absolutely anything you want to buy at Stampseed with the promo code Luke15. So with all of that said, let's get back into this interview. And like, I think the same holds true today. Like a lot of people are looking at Coinbase, oh, they're safe, they're regulated. Well, everybody said the same thing about BlockFi and FTX a couple of years ago. So again, take self-custody.
I will say that there's usually some warning when those things collapse. So BlockFi obviously had no idea what they were doing. Do you remember when they sent 750 Bitcoins to someone instead of $750? and then they asked for it back and offered this like joke amount of money to them in compensation. I don't know if they ever got it, but like they stayed around for like a year after that, and I'm like, why would you ever leave your money on a platform run by clowns like that?
Mm,
And Mt. Gox was the same. Mt. Gox was like, for a year, no one could get any fiat off there. It would take like months of hassling them. And I'm like, yeah, this thing is going to explode at any point.
mm,
And like, I withdrew anything I had on there, and it was like 8 months later, it collapsed. So I'm not saying you're right.
mm,
Definitely get your coins off exchanges. But like, I'm also saying, like, there are competent exchanges that probably won't run off with your money, so you're safe to send your fiat there and then buy and then withdraw. Like, but don't send your money to like incompetent people like BlockFi or Mt. Gox. Like the minute you start hearing rumors, Quadriga in Canada was the same.
mm,
There was rumors about them collapsing for months. Everyone was saying something weird's going on here, and then the guy was faked his own death, right? With this in this region of India,
mm.
where everyone's known for going to buy death certificates and all that. I don't know. I digress.
I've actually watched a really interesting documentary on the collapse of Quadriga. It's actually a pretty well done documentary as well. So that's an interesting rabbit hole. Never
Can you
trust.
share it with me? I haven't
Yeah,
seen it.
I'll
I
send it to you after the fact. It was on Netflix.
I got burnt by that. Not personally, but there were people. I'd only just moved to Canada in 2018, and I went around telling everyone Bitcoin was great, and everyone that listened to me opened accounts on Quadriga,
Oh
and
shit.
like there was one guy that was messaging me for a whole year, like, really, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure. And then he finally one day was like, that's it, I'm going for it. Sent a bunch of money to Quadriga, bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and like 2 days later it collapsed.
Oh
Like
shit.
without him withdrawing it. And I'm like, dude, I'm so like I
Oh
couldn't
no.
believe it. Like it was the worst luck I've ever seen. Like he's because it collapsed in 2019 and I met that dude in 2018 at the beginning of the year. So it was like, dude, he had literally the worst luck I've ever come across in the whole space. Because whatever he bought would probably be worth hundreds of thousands now as well.
Mm. Did
Makes me
you get
sick.
him? Did you get him to buy after the collapse?
I don't know. I don't think we ever spoke after that. I think he was just too sick, like to
Yeah.
even like. I don't blame him. I would be too. But I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't my fault. But
Mm,
I still feel responsible for it. I wasn't. I never used Quadriga because I was still in the UK.
mm,
Like, so I wasn't paying attention and keeping my ear to the ground around whether it was going to collapse. And when it did, again, there were all those stories like people
mm,
saying, oh, yeah, they were falling apart. Like, no one was getting their withdrawals for ages. I didn't pay any attention. If I had been, I would have been contacting everyone I knew that I'd ever spoken to about Bitcoin in Canada and gone, get your money off Quadriga. It's
mm.
collapsing. But I just didn't notice. So send me that Netflix documentary if you don't mind. I'd like to see it.
100% will do. Is very well done. Now, Mechanic, we've been going for probably near an hour now. Is there anything that you think we missed today that's really important to touch on in the Bitcoin space, or anything that you think is a little bit underrated and not talked about enough?
I think we covered everything.
Mm,
I think it's a long, complicated rabbit hole, and just the learning never stops. And I think Bitcoin's here's my perspective on it. Overall, I think Bitcoin is inevitable, but it's probably going to suck in comparison to how good we thought it might be. I don't think anyone else thinks that. I think everyone else thinks it's
mm,
great and it's going to fix everything, or it's a joke and it's going to die. Those seem to be the two opinions in the world, and I don't really agree with either of them. I think it's inevitable. I think it's just everyone's going to be using third-party custodians and LSPs instead of Lightning nodes and just all this stuff, which just undermines it. So I think that's pretty much where we're at. So buy as much Bitcoin as you can and keep your expectations quite low, I would say, and then live a good life.
Sound advice, my friend. Bitcoin Mechanic, where can people find you?
Grass-fed Bitcoin on Twitter,
Yep.
and I don't know. I need to pin my Noster to my Twitter so that people start going to it. That's it. Yeah, and ocean.xyz. That's where I work, and that's the project I'm working on at the moment, trying to fix centralization in mining. And that's it. Yeah, I don't have anything else.
It's a problem that needs fixing. So thank you to you and everybody else who's doing good things at Ocean. Thank you so much for your time today as well, Mechanic.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So I really hope you enjoyed that short and sharp little clip of my interview with Bitcoin Mechanic. If you want to watch the full interview of my discussion with Bitcoin Mechanic, where we talk more about the risks of the Bitcoin ETFs, as well as miner centralization, 51% attacks on Bitcoin, and we even talked about why ordinals are a potentially a nation state attack on Bitcoin. The full interview was released literally minutes ago. I'm going to put a link to that video right up on screen right about there. And with all that said, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Really hope you have a good day.